chosen this topic for discussion, and making these choices is not a simple one. You would find that as he starts explaining, followed by Mr. Venkat Raman of MD of Titan, and Rahul Verma of Info, a research company, we will find that there is a lot into making these choices. Pankaj Seth himself is looking after insights for Hindustan Times Media Limited. He explains to me that insights are what you get about what motivates consumers, what drives them. And this is more than market research. This is a very intimate understanding of consumer behavior. You watch consumer actions and then arrive at what motivates them to do. And Pankaj is going to talk about his learnings in Pons, where he worked before, Hindustan Lever, HDFC Life Insurance, and also in his current job. A lot of it in Pons and current job is what I guess. And we are today very lucky to have Venkatraman, C.K. Venkatraman, the Managing Director of Titan Company Limited. It involves both Titan as a brand and also Tanishq as a brand.
Mr. Balraman, may I ask Rahul and Pankaj to put on your video, please? Rahul, Venkat, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Sorry, Mr. Balraman, please go ahead.
Yeah. Venkat has a unique brand experience to talk about. As you know, both Tanishq and Titan, a large part of their marketing effort is into retailing. And so they add an enormous amount of service to the brand. And how that makes a huge difference to the value perception is that something we can all listen to Venkat, and by asking him for clarifications, understand it even better. And we are also lucky to have Rahul Verma today. And Rahul is someone from market research, and he has founded a company called Infolip Market Research and Consultancy. And he's someone who is from our own Bangalore, and he has worked in Tata Consultancy, and he has worked in IMRB and also AC Nielsen. And he is going to talk about scientific analysis through statistical means of consumer choices to guide marketeers. So today we have a lot of deep down into scientific understanding of how consumers think, how they manage conflicting desires, pulls, wants, and how they finally make a choice. Now, over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you, Mr. Balraman. Good evening to all the attendees. Mr. Balraman took you through, I'm just sharing my screen. Mr. Balraman took you through what the plan of the session is, and while our names were called out, a very, very important stakeholder and the set of people for the evening is all of you attendees. Because you've taken out time and you're displaying the keenness to learn and the ambition to grow and make your businesses grow, which is the starting point. So we are hopeful that in the next hour plus, hour 20 minutes, you will find value and you will take this further, and you are the key people for that. Before I get into the equation per se, let's understand the context a little bit. There are various frameworks used to enable growth. And you would have encountered these in your companies, you would have encountered in your academic, you would have encountered in your businesses. There are the 4 P's of marketing, which are used by people: product, place, price, promotion. So using that as a strategy planning tool. There is an innovation funnel. There's an idea, there's a prototype, there's a go ahead. So these are ultimately frameworks. There's a perceived value being greater than price. So not just value, but perceived value, as Mr. Balraman said, what the consumer perceives while taking a decision. Sometimes spontaneous, sometimes thought through. Perceived value greater than price. There's another equation another model which is used called the ANSOP model for growth. New customer, old customer, new product, old product. So it's a 2x2 grid. So what should your strategy be? And these are models which are used, BCG growth metrics, which maps out portfolio. This is typically where there's a portfolio of brands, of businesses, of customers. What's your share? What's the growth pattern? It's a BCG growth metric. Then there's a more generic without a label, but how do you drive? Grow the market, which is get more people, grow the share, which is get more share, and grow ARPU, average revenue per user, right? So there are various models used, which are used at various stages by various people. Today, we are going to focus on one of these, which is the winning equation of perceived value is greater than price. Four important parts of the word here. Perceived, which is not what value the manufacturer sees. This is the value which the customer sees, the client sees, value. What are dimensions of value? How do they see value? How do they see instantaneous value? How do they see long-term value? What's the product aspect? What's the so perceived value? Greater than, in the consumer's mind, price. So the more one plays on these levers and more you dial up this equation in the consumer's mind, the more the consumer behavior tends to move in a direction favoring your business or brand. So we'll first look at perceived value. Let's unpeel, understand both the theoretical framework and examples. So winning customers via greater perceived value. Perceived value has various subparts. One is deliver more quantity. So simple, more mileage for a bike. So earlier you were getting 50, new bike gives 60 kilometers per liter. More GB in a plan. For 50 rupees you were getting X GB, now you're getting 2X GB. Nothing else changes. Nothing else changes, no part of the product or service experience changes, it's just more value. Second, higher performance. So the same things, but performing better. I have a better network and better emotional payoff also. Remember, emotional payoff is very, very important. So more confident person, more reliable service, you feel better, your probability of success goes up, right? So that the emotional payoff is as important to deliver. So performance is not just rational, but emotional. So reliable service, reliable product. Privacy. Privacy is an emotional payoff. You've seen the latest Apple advertising. It's all on privacy. So it's also about the emotional payoff. Newer add-on features. So the product had a certain set of features. So earlier you had a phone. 2 decades back when phones came, every week it was just a phone, then camera got added, then more camera got added. Today I saw ad with 4 cameras. Detergent. Earlier there was a basic detergent. Then there was a detergent which didn't hurt the hands, so softer detergent. Then there was a detergent which also had a better fragrance. So add-on features, right, which are there. And the trick is to get that without increasing price. Now, small price increases may be there, but not to dramatically change the equation by significantly increasing price, but play on the, so consumer starts seeing as time goes by, customer sees greater perceived value for one of these, right? Some of you will recognize this gentleman, Elon Musk, one of the most famous inventors of our time, and quote from him, great companies are built on great products. So those were all about the product and services. Even the famous Tesla has a lot of service aspect. In the same equation now, let's understand the price. What do we mean by price? What are the facets of price? So winning customers via lower price, but there are very, very interesting facets of price. First is said straightaway, lower overall price. Okay, lower price versus competition. Most famous example is a Reliance Jio launch a couple of years back. Zero cost service for 3 years. Some cars and bikes launched that. When Hero Honda separated and became Hero, so gives zero cost service for 5 years. So consumers see greater, I save that money. Lower outlay each time. This is a very interesting thing. EMIs. So you're buying a bike, you're buying a house, buying a car, you pay monthly each month. So your outlay each time is lesser. So the price of that bike or that house or that car has not gone down, but your outlay and even durables, now even some of the e-commerce companies offer that. So on your monthly basis, your outlay is there. And the innovation of this was on sachets in FMCG were very, very big. So every time you spend that 2 rupees, 2 rupees, 3 rupees, over the month you may spend as much, but your outlay, it's in your control. Third is compulsory price. This is extremely popular in digital. This is the more, it's called a freemium model. Some bit is free, some bit is for premium. Some bit you can go to the site, content site, entertainment site, news site, music site, web series. Some bit is free, some bit behind a paywall. Some people, that's a very popular model. Then returns policy. E-commerce again has used this a lot in the last few years. So it's not compulsory any longer. So you go over price, you want to return it, no questions asked. So the trick, it's within the price, there are various sub-facets of that which companies and brands use. And even some of the government intervention, if you see successful one, play on the same equation. Lower total cost of ownership. This is a very, very fascinating and tool. And this is used by people where the upfront cost is higher. So car TCO, cars are so total cost of ownership. So the Japanese model. So the upfront price that you pay may be higher, but that vehicle will last you longer with lower maintenance. So year one, you may pay more, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you may pay less. So your total cost of ownership over the X years will be lesser. So total cost of ownership, buy 3 for 2. Supermarkets run this a lot, right? So while your outlay goes up, but actually your total cost of ownership is lesser. So there are nuance points here, but there are different facets of, it's not just slashing price. If you see out of these 4 levers, only the first one is just about cutting price. The rest 3 are all about adapting your elements of the equation and balancing elements there. And the trick and the imperative is to do this without lowering consumer value or customer value. So hold the value constant and play on this lever to accelerate growth. And now I'll show some examples. This is another very famous man, Jeff Bezos. So this is Jeff Bezos' vision of Amazon is to be the most customer-friendly company in the world. So his quote, customers are invited like a party where the host make experience a little better. So let's go in time. So what did Pond's talcum powder? How did Pond's talcum powder use this same equation to deliver on perceived value and lower price? So examples of that, it's a cosmetic, right? For beautification, for fragrance, for freshness, femininity, confidence. So more attractive fragrance. So on the left, the pink was a historical one. Then Dreamflower Magic was launched early 90s with a more attractive, alluring fragrance. So people who wanted more fragrance. So attractive. Second, emotional connect. To the woman of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, of how do you walk in tandem with them in their aspirations? So very, very motivating, engaging, feminine. So emotional connect was far stronger. Features is not just the product. The packaging plays a very important role in toiletries, cosmetics, and many categories. So the Magic had used the latest technology of printing, world-class printing on tin when it was tin, then moving to plastics, roto caps, etc. So that's again a feature in the consumption of that. New feature and ingredient, sandal talc. So sandal is a very, very popular ingredient in South. So for the southern markets and a bit for the eastern markets, Pond's talc with sandal in it. So all the reassurance of Pond's plus the goodness of sandal. So sandal talc. Let's see on the price side now, right? So Dreamflower talc, 50 gram, 20 gram pack, right? So it's the same product without lowering the packaging, the fragrance, excellent, but smaller packs, so you have to outlay lesser. 40% price cut. This happened due to the tax cut in the 90s. As the economy was opened up, the government used to have 125% tax earlier. That was brought down to 30%. So that 100% of that cost cut was passed to the consumer, which led to the boom in the economy. Third is sachet, 8 gram. This is a learning. This did not work because a sachet, imagine a sachet, you can't sprinkle talcum powder very easily out of a sachet. At least at the technology at that time it was tried. So this was purely on a price play. So product quality was good. Packaging quality was good, but functionality of sprinkling was not good. So it did not work. I've deliberately kept it here that it's not just price. You have to maintain the other side of the equation as well. And total cost of ownership, the bigger pack, 400 grams. So yes, the outlay is higher, and TCO is a strategy. Anybody who's selling higher cost products and services, total cost of ownership is a very, very important lever which is used. So here again, you get 400 grams, 2.5 times the price of 100 grams. So your loss longer, right? So these were examples here. So again, remember, so there's a value side, more quantity, higher performance, newer add-on features, and there's a price side, and it's only one is about overall price, rest about outlay each time, compulsory price, and total cost of ownership. And important to keep that while we are trying to touch on one side of the equation, the other side should hold parity broadly. So if you're driving up performance, price should not go up suddenly, immediately. It may go up slowly, little. Similarly, if you're on the cost side, on price side, if you're playing there, the product quality, etc., should hold well. So that's, I give you an example also of the sachet which did not work. Very important to learn. Now here's a market that all of us have experienced, Indian mobile phone market, and we all remember the phones we started with. So I want you, wherever you are, in Chennai, in Bangalore, in Delhi, in Pune, in India, outside India, take just 60 seconds. You've seen this journey. Think through examples at your end. Note it down at your end. Put it on your phone if you have a pen and paper. Write down examples. Where did you see perceived value being dialed up by the mobile phone market in India? And where did you see price being dialed down? So think of examples. I'm giving 15 seconds gone, another 30 seconds, 40 seconds will take. Do think, especially my younger friends out there. Think. And everybody, just think of examples on perceived value. What all has got dialed upwards on the perceived value? And what all has got touched on the pricing lever? So now on your phone, you can note down on a piece of paper, but do think of examples because this has been amazing. Hundreds of us, mobile phone in its current form did not exist when we were born. Well, at least 99% of us, I'm sure. But we've seen this remarkable transformation globally and in India. Now let's go. I hope you've got some on perceived value and or price written down. Let's see. So more performance of network. So, okay, so the network is what you're offering. So reach is more. Earlier, if you would drive out from the main city, network would break. It works well. Speed has improved. Nowadays, you can go from place A to place B and keep watching IPL on the mobile phone, right? Speed has improved. New features, again, anchoring is same via hardware. Camera, one camera, back camera, multiple, dual SIMs. No features via software. And software is first a new company apps, right? So new companies have come up which are purely app-based, and old companies have also adapted. State Bank of India, HDFC Bank, Indian Railway, every old companies, Hindustan Times, old brands have also adapted. So there are features via software. New features via paid for services. Zomato Gold, the freemium model in music. So there are new paid for services, the whole OTT. So there are paid for, so there's a lot which has happened, and I'm sure that in your notes you had captured some of these. Then let's look at the price side of the equation. Price side is a lower price, incoming free. Incoming free in the early 2000s was a big, and some of the younger team members, colleagues who are there, industry colleagues on this, in the audience, you may not even know that earlier the charge for the phone incoming call was also charged. In the 90s until early 2000s, if somebody made a call to somebody on the mobile, the guy making the call didn't pay, receiving the call paid. Incoming was charged, and the guy who was receiving the call had to pay, right? So that was a big inflection point earlier in the a few years, early part of 2000s. Then lower charges for voice and data. This is all known. There were lower cost of the phone also. I remember paying the first mobile phone I bought, Nokia, was for 7,000. Similar model became 4,000. Similar model became 1,500 over a decade. Of course, by then there were better models at 10,000 and 15,000. But incoming became free. Voice data charges were lower. Outlay each time, you controlled what you paid, prepaid. So you could control, there was no billing surprises. Because in the early years, people used to have a lot of billing surprises also because they did not know. And you travel, roaming was charged. So people used to get shocking bills, hundreds and thousands, etc., which they couldn't control. That was a big apprehension, especially when you traveled abroad. There were big shockers. One heard of stories of people getting tens of thousands rupees as bill. So prepaid became because you knew exactly at the start what you were paying for, right? What you could consume, how many days, how many GB, how many minutes, etc., etc. So that was there. So these were the triggers which are on the price. So remember, it's not just about cutting price. It's about, so if I was a heavy user, I could buy 2 prepaids also. I could finish off my X hundred rupees. If I wanted a roaming plan, I could top that up. So telecom has been an amazing example of delivering on this lever as well on the pricing side of it, right? So Jeff Bezos, again, a famous quote is raising prices and lowering prices. Jeff Bezos again sees taxation as a cost, for example. So their business model, till about 2 years back, Amazon never made any profit, because if they made profit, but the stock price rose. If they made profit, they had to pay higher taxes. If they paid taxes, they said, okay, it's a charge to the consumer, right? Of course, one can argue it's a little controversial also, but it is perfectly legal. So they also see, they have been on the pricing side. You saw a quote from Jeff Bezos on the customer side of it. Now you're seeing a quote from Jeff Bezos on the pricing side of it, right? So that's important as well. Now we've talked about consumer businesses, but not all businesses are consumer businesses, right? There are some essentially B2B oriented businesses as well, right? So the question is that, can this equation be used to plan growth in a B2B growth business? So again, since we're a large set of people connecting up, we'll not take a poll, but I want you to think through at your end. I want you to think through and take a minute. Exactly this, so will this equation apply to B2B businesses also? On the perceived value and dialing it up and price and using that as a lever. Yes. So put your answer. You have to have a vote. Put it on again at your end. We'll not count it. But do have a view. Yes, no, and yes. You may put a maybe, but yes, no, right? So that's. I'll take another 20 seconds. I'll wait so that at your end you've had. Oh, this is a consumer business thing, but in our lives we will work with businesses which will be consumer. There'll be B2B facets to that. Sometimes we may move into another job where B2B component may be higher. Nowadays, businesses are also B2B to C. So you sell to a business which is selling to a consumer, right? So understanding this is very important and having a view, right? Will this equation work in a B2B business as well? So I hope most of you have, or all of you have taken a vote this way or that way. So yes, it will. And I'll illustrate that. Remember, anchoring is still the same. Okay, on the perceived value, more quantity, higher performance, newer add-on features, and on the price side of it, outlay, the compulsory price and total cost of ownership. Yes, overall price as well, but the next three of the price, because there are multiple facets of that. My current job where I work with a media company. I work with HT Media Limited, and we run the country's second largest English news site and paper, Hindi news site and paper, and business news site and paper. Our business news brand is Mint, and the site is Live Mint. Some of you may have experienced that, and HT as well. But we have a sort of radio stations as well. While we have a total customer base of 220 million across our mediums, but our revenue, like in media, a lot of the bulk of the revenue is essentially B2B. So it comes from advertising, both in our print business and digital business. It is over 75% of the total revenue. At times it's in some of the verticals, it's as high as 90% also. So it's essentially, while at one end we are engaging readers with news, credible news information, but to keep that engine running, the revenue comes from advertising. So we are a B2B business in that extent. And I'll now illustrate examples how this equation we have used for B2B. Again, sorry for quoting Jeff Bezos a lot. He's been a great achiever, so very inspirational. So one of the ways to get out of a tight box is invent your way out. So let's see examples of that. Value to advertisers, more audience reach. So earlier we were only in Delhi many years back, and then we became Delhi and Bombay with our print. This is with the print business only. Then new features for more impact, because advertiser said, can you help me sell my brand more? I want to build my brand in this market and I'll advertise, but what more can you do for me? So we said, okay, sir, we can do events for you. We've done travel conclaves, education fairs, village activities, school activities, codeathon. Right now we're doing the country's largest coding contest and we have partners on that. So COVID. So advertising plus those, now the events are already run, of course. In the past they were physically run as well. And we have done a lot of cyclothons, Olympiads, right? So advertising and events. So in a B2B business, that's a new feature which we brought to the table. And we're not the only one, the other leading players also do that, but our industry has innovated. New feature for more impact, print plus digital. Digital has grown. So again, if we are doing a print campaign, the print plus digital, many times digital plus print. So more new features for the same advertiser. So our client here, remember, in this B2B business is the advertiser. So in the day the print ad is going to come, before that day and next day, digital will also come. And there'll be digital has various facets which we magnify, etc. Right? New features are even glazed jackets. So those of you who read a newspaper will sometimes see ad on the front page, right? It's more impactful, it's more catchy, it's costlier for us to produce, but it's great value for our advertisers, right? It also, because also the value for advertisers and actually for readers as well, because it gives the throw of that brand. A premium brand wants to present itself in a premium environment. So glazed jackets. We have also done 2-page, what is called French windows. So it opens like a window, right? So larger point to illustrate here is the B2B business like media on the revenue model side, also the same equation of more audiences, new features we have been doing and continue to do. Again, on lower price, this is again a very fascinating story. And there are various parts of price, and none of these examples are about cutting price that I've captured here and illustrate one-to-one. Many years in the first, again, as the startup culture started in India, we realized that companies were keen on preserving cash. So our company, our industry started doing ad for equity barter. So for advertising with our group, the startup does not give money, they give their stocks. So in the case of real estate, which is a very important category for our advertising. So instead of giving cash, they give us in barter some property. So it's a barter. So there's a lower cash outlay. So there's a price in terms of cash is lower for people, and that's done in industry, and it's done with a lot of checks and balances, etc. Second is geo-targeting. So somebody says, okay, I will come to ht.com or LiveMint and I like your audiences and I will advertise, but you know what? I don't want to take the all India package. So we give them the top, or give her the top 3 metros. So it's called geo-targeting. Those of you in this line will know. So what happens, out of 50 million people, they may want to reach only 20 million people, right? So their outlay goes down. And there may be somebody else who wants to reach the other 30 million. So that person takes that. So what happens? The price for each of the customer goes down, but it does not mean that we lose any margin. So that's another facet of price in that B2B business. Automation, programmatic advertising is there. So consultative selling, you can buy through our salespeople will help you make a plan, or you can do it yourself. It's like banks, e-commerce, it's a do it yourself. So you can come and place ads directly. It will be at a lower rate, but it will follow an algorithm. It's called programmatic buying, and it's done through some networks, but it comes at a lower rate than consultative, right? Lower price in ad versus in supplements. So there's a main paper and there are supplements. Supplements have slightly lesser readership, but they come in the same page, in the same book. So a little lower price there as well. So larger point is that in a B2B example also, this equation does work in a B2B. So fundamental is there's a value part of it, perceived value, and there's the price, and the challenge is to do and permutation combination, but while touching one lever, important to keep the other lever constant. So when you're dialing up on the perceived value, should not dramatically change price in short term or even long term. And especially when you're on the price side, that time definitely the quality part should not suffer, the product part of it in that sense. But there are innovations examples that I shared. So I have covered. I'm now reaching towards the end of my module, and then I'll hand over the baton to Venkat. So question is that if you are running in an operating team, operating system, operating company, operating organization, so how can you accelerate this journey? So this is a innovation funnels. You may have come across it. It is used by various organizations. People use word like pipeline, and tunnel. So it's not a tunnel. So it's innovation funnel and not innovation tunnel. Remember that. Tunnel, anything which goes in comes out. In a funnel, not everything which goes in comes out. Very important. So ideas, if you see on this illustration, there may be 10 ideas, right? Not everybody may be worth it. So if you see the legend at the bottom, the ideas come essentially from either there's a new technology change happening, or there's a market demand happening. Many times even comes from competition. There's some competitive activity happening. So the trick is to have a set of ideas. And then there are 3 questions, simple that are asked. First of all, can we do it? I have an idea, I want to build this, but can your production systems, your operating teams build it? So that's very important. Second is there a market for it? Yes, we can build it, but we know that the customer will value it. We know the customer will give us greater attention, greater share, or greater price, or they'll consume more, they'll give us more share. So customer. So first is company, customer, and third is cash. You may remember it as 3 C's simple. First the customer, first the company, can we produce it? Customer, will they love it? And cash, will we make money? Because if you are doing something which can be done and the customer loves it, but your finance people say that, no, we don't want to make money on this, then there's no point. Because only when you make money, you can develop it further, right? So there are ideas. Ideas typically start with, then there are proposals, then there's a thing called prototype, right? You can read up about this on the net and you'll observe it. So it's not the larger point is, it is not an innovation tunnel, it is an innovation funnel. So people use, I have 20 ideas in the pipeline. Pipeline is not you need a funnel. So, and these 3 gates, as they're called, you can use 3 C, the customer, the company, can you produce it, the customer, and cash. It should. So it does not mean idea has to get rejected. Out of 3 C's, let's say when you reach a proposal stage, 2 C's are a tick and third C is not a tick. It does not mean that it gets rejected. You go back to that C. So if, let's say finance says that cash, then you work with your supply chain and with the finance and see, okay, how can we make it work? Similarly, if 2 of the 3 are correct, then you go to the third. Customer says, yes, this aspect I like, this aspect I don't. Then you again prototype it and fine tune. And then see how can I dial it up more for the customer as well. So that's the innovation funnel approach. And using this approach in this funnel, a part of this again, giving a lot of examples, because I was just thinking that for a lot of younger people who are the role models, at the global level, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are the big ones. In India, there are many emerging as well. But, the core thought is important to have a feedback loop. So you have to learn, what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and that's a learning curve. If you ever read the history of Apple, so I had the fortune of attending a conference where the people who worked with Apple, a company called IDEO, design, they were giving us a story about how Apple's was a rock star of the 80s, struggled through the 90s and then 2000s again. So a lot of their mistakes and learnings of the 90s, they learned from their feedback loop and they built into the, as they went into the 2000s. So the saying in innovation is fail fast, fail often, fail forward. So forward, learn from the experience, right? So that helps. This is a very generic one. You would have heard that, but it always helps. So as a team, as a company, one has to figure out, once you get your winning formula, it's more about scaling, but figuring out which are those 20-80, which will get us those results. So 20% of efforts getting 80% of results. So successful innovation using the winning equation is a very, very important facet of that. And so you've seen the theoretical construct of the winning equation. I shared some examples, and now I'll hand over to Beaton, to one of the most successful and amazing success stories of corporate India, a self-made Indian brand and business, which has been built, as Mr. Balram was sharing earlier. Venkat has been a key part of that journey over the last nearly 3 decades. So I hand over the baton to Venkat to share his experiences on this amazing success story.
Thank you, Pankaj. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
So, hi everyone who's watching this from all around. It was great to be invited by MMA for this, and I was very, very impressed with the diligent, dedicated manner in which the veterans of Ponds have been going about it for a long while. It was nice to hear that. I think, the subject matter of perceived value being greater than price, I think it would be useful for an organization to figure out what they are better at. Are they better at delivering perceived value greater than price? Or are they better at delivering more value for money? And this often depends on the cultural moorings of the people who create that organization and thereafter start adding people to them, to the organization, to the various parts of the organization. What I mean by that is that there is a certain natural style with which all of us play, even management, and some of us are much better at creating perceived value greater than price, and some of us are much better delivering value for money. And therefore, if there is an opportunity in a market for delivering greater perceived value, and if you think the people around you in the organization that you want to create can be good at that, it's better to do it that way as opposed to struggle to deliver value for money if you are not at all that kind. I'm not saying that there are no organizations which are good in both, but typically you find that you are very good in one and maybe okay in the other. We happen to be better at delivering greater perceived value rather than delivering value for money. Almost every one of the brands that Titan Company has is what is called a premium brand, which operates above the average in each one of the categories that it operates. So let me now start with the Titan I Plus business. It's about 15 years old. It's a pretty old category, and Titan came into it in 2005. And right from the beginning, we decided to operate with a focus on delivering greater perceived value than price. It was unorganized, underserved industry. There was really no corporate no corporate in that industry. There were many regional players, but they're not what one would typically define as corporations, which are listed entities, governed very well and all that. So we came into it wanting to deliver an overall service or a solution or an augmented product, whatever you call it, which had multiple dimensions to it, and operate with a kind of premium pricing, which delivered exceptional value to the customer overall, and also delivered very good value to the company and its shareholders. So if I were to take the manner in which we approach it today, for example, like I wear specs myself, even though at the moment I'm not wearing it, when I'm talking to you. And I've been wearing it since 1982. And I've been to a typical optician maybe 7-8 times in the period 82 to 2005 when Titan wasn't there. And it was a very, very simple kind of activity. You go to the optician, you pick up a frame that you like, and the eye test is a reasonably quick kind of activity with a equipment that was not particularly impressive looking, but the whole solution seemed to work. I could see well. I didn't have any particular issue with my, the clarity of my eyesight. But after Titan came in, and after I started experiencing, and after I started understanding what we were doing, the first thing is, when you look at the optometrists that we employ, first of all, they're all qualified optometrists who understand the science of this whole thing, how the problems of short sight or long sight or cylindrical vision actually develop, and what is the science behind it. They've studied it in optometry institutes. So they're experts in the field of optometry. And they're dressed in the Titan store like experts are dressed. So when you go into a Titan Eye Plus store and when you see them, and when you meet them and they start talking to you, you understand that you're in good hands. And then you go inside the testing room, and then you see this really high-tech looking machine, in fact, 2-3 different machines, but a complete setup. Then you realize even more that this is a very sophisticated way of checking your eyesight. And then, of course, the entire process of the 20-step checking that we do happens, and you understand that the various dimensions relating to whatever is wrong with your eyes are being very, very systematically assessed before the expert concludes on what is required for you. Thereafter, when you come out, now the glasses, which are in a way relatively the more important part of the solution, there are large global companies which are experts in this, Essilor, for example. Okay, and so in a way, the technology that Essilor has is available to every optician in this country, even though Titan has separately done a fair amount of innovation in the area of lenses as well. But in the main, the technology is available to all opticians. So what is the difference that Titan can bring? The difference that Titan can bring is an approach which the people we call eyewear consultants spend good quality time in understanding the customer's situation in terms of age, profession, the kind of work that the person does, and therefore the contact with various kinds, and especially today, for example, so much of computer, related work. So, you're always staring at the screen kind of thing. So there is a good amount of customizing the various technology solutions that are available using the testing result that has come out of the optometry room. And of course, various frames, depending on the size of the face, the shape of the face, and what fits well on your nose, what looks good on your face. So that expertise and that customer orientation is the other very, very important part of it. And therefore, the expertise and the empathy, which together deliver a value to the customer in the Titan Eye Plus store, which is far superior to what that person, gets or perceives that he gets in other stores, is what we would call our customer value proposition. And as long as we keep delivering that expertise and empathy combination in a perceptibly vivid manner, then the customer clearly, even when he acknowledges or she acknowledges the overall total product appears to be more expensive than somewhere else of an equivalent product, but she or he clearly acknowledges that the overall value that she has received for that price is much higher, much higher than in other competition stores, and therefore she is willing to keep coming back. So that is one very powerful example, and the result of that, all of you or many of you would be aware of this concept called the Net Promoter Score. So the Net Promoter Score is a very powerful barometer KPI in the Titan I Plus, in Titan as a whole, and in Titan I Plus as well. And our NPS in Titan I Plus is in excess of 75, which is a global benchmark. The entire customer experience program of Titan I Plus has been voted the world's best program in a customer experience strategy conference held in the Netherlands in 2018. They won the prize, beating Microsoft, Dell, Shell, and such global companies. And therefore, the focus on understanding what are all the key things that matter in a particular category, and then building multiple things to deliver those things to the customers is how you actually deliver a greater perceived value than the price. The second Titan company example that I would like to cover is Tanishq. Now, Tanishq is 25 years old nearly, launched in 1996 in Cathedral Road in Chennai. That was where Tanishq was actually born. And around 1997 sometime, we realized that we needed to start changing our approach. And over the next 3-4 years, we changed many things. Gold jewelry of the traditional kind of gold jewelry to start with, and then the carat meter to demonstrate the purity of the gold, and so on and so forth. And around 2006, 2007, I have been myself associated with Tanishq for about 15 years. And around 2006, 2007, one of the things that really struck us was, the manner in which the local jeweler across the country was dealing with his customers was very, very, powerful. It was, so personalized individual, where the owner actually knew every customer himself or herself. And every time the customer would come back, the customer would be greeted by the owner. The sales staff would, know some special things about the owner, and so on and so forth. So we realized that if Tanishq were to become a very large and the largest jewelry brand in the country, we need to combine two things. One is the modern aspects of product design, branding, assortment design, retail experience that we were bringing to the table, with the age-old principles of personalization, relationship, and warmth that the local jeweler was doing so well. And so we decided to combine these two things.
Group captain.
Hey, listen, Sheikh, just check. There is somebody.
Okay, sir, I will mute you, sir.
Can you mute it? Can you mute? Yeah.
So we decided that these two powerful ideas needed to be combined in a very, very systematic manner. And we ended up doing that. And we have done that in a very, very powerful and very, very effective way over the last close to 15 years. Now, what we did was we started a loyalty program in 2007. Perhaps one of the earliest, maybe the earliest, perhaps in the jewelry industry, called Anuttara. This loyalty program had multiple objectives. One, of course, was points. For every purchase, there was a certain percentage of it which got delivered as points, and the customers could use the points to buy jewelry in the future. We also ended up collecting a fair amount of information about the customer through that entire program: birthday, anniversary, birthday of your husband or your wife, your taste in music, the special events, the festivals that you celebrated, the kind of books that you liked reading and all that. And what we ended up doing multiple things with this. For example, we would celebrate the birthdays of customers in their homes. The sales staff would take cakes, visit the customer in her house on the birthday morning, after, of course, confirming that she is in town. And then it would be a surprise visit, and the birthday would be celebrated with a cake cutting in the customer's house. Or on those days when the customers happened to visit the store on the birthday, and we would know that when they landed, and then we would order a cake, and all other customers would sing happy birthday to this customer as well. And the relationship between the customers and the sales staff got built so well over the last 15 years that it became a very, very large family. I mean, there is no other word I would use it. It became a very large family where the customers would end up inviting the sales staff to the marriages in their homes, to the Graha Pravesh and stuff like that. We started doing this in a local way. For example, the Bombay stores would make the typical sweet dish of Kerala, which is an Adap Pradaman or a Chakka Pradaman, which is actually a kheer. For those of you who don't know the word payasam, it's a sweet dish of Kerala. So the Bombay stores would get that payasam made on Onam Day and give it to all Malayali customers of the Bombay stores. And the Malayali customers would be blown by this gesture, by this thoughtfulness, because many of them would be sitting away from their state. Some of them would be young people who are may not even know how to make a payasam perhaps, but wishing on that day, oh God, I wish I was back home with my mom in Trivandrum and I was, tasting this payasam in the midst of the Onam festivity, and suddenly the bell rings and the Tanishq person is standing there with a packet in her hand, and it turns out to be the payasam that you were so much wishing for. So in a way, delight, beyond imagination in multiple ways. And that whole approach of make sure, and the mantra that I have kept telling every staff over the years, I start with this mantra when I gather them around me, when I visit the stores. It does not matter if the customer walks out of the store with an empty hand, but as long as she walks out with a smile in her eyes, a smile in her heart, it's okay. She will come back later some other time and buy Tanishq. But if she walks out with a bag in her hand, but dissatisfied with whatever happened in the store, then she may not come back. So this mantra of creating a really magical experience, fans for Tanishq, is something that we've worked hard for 15 years at least. And the result is very much to see today, where we have a huge digital program, even as we speak, when the pandemic is upon us and people are sitting at home. But we have a very, very highly qualified database with us through which we know the taste of the customer, the purchase history of the customer, the special events in terms of birthday, anniversary and stuff like that. And therefore, using analytics and the CRM information, we are able to figure out which customer is possibly ripe for what kind of purchase, and then we reach that information to the individual salesperson in a Varanasi, in a Rajkot, in a Rohtak, or in a Tuticorin, wherever, and that person reaches out to the customer she knows and builds that conversation. And it is a warm call because both of them know each other so well over years of contact. And then a sale happens, even when there is perhaps no need. So in a situation like the pandemic, when actually, it begs the question, who needs another watch? Who needs another pair of glasses? Who needs a pendant, new pendant? Our ability, our recovery rate in the last 2-3 months is been built on this entire phygital thing. The investments that we have made in digital and the huge investments that we have made over the last 30 years, and in my particular experience in Tanishq in the last 15 years, on building relationships between thousands of our staff and millions of our customers. So there, through all this, we deliver, because Tanishq is perceived to be an expensive product. Even our customers tell us that, yes, Tanishq is a little more expensive, but when it comes to total value, it is too good. And they're not even going into the trust area, which of course is a separate matter altogether. And that trust comes to us from Tata's also. But even without the trust, what Tanishq delivers in this whole perceived value is much more than the price, and therefore that's why we are the biggest, most trusted, most desired jewelry brand in the country. So these are two examples of Titan Company that I wanted to share.
Thanks, Venkat. Very amazing, and no wonder Titan has been such an amazing success story as a brand, as a company, as well as a stock for those who are investing. And the formula of Titan, I plus of expertise and empathy, and Tanishq of modern designs and strong relationships, and phygital, the amazing word you shared with everybody, phygital, that formula, building on trust foundation, has made it an amazing legend within our lifetimes. Thank you so much. Now we move on to Rahul. Thank you for your inputs, Venkat. Now, Rahul, over to you to share, build on that with some more analytical, insights from your side.
Thanks, Pankaj. Thanks a lot. Is my voice clear?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks a lot. That was amazing, Mr. Venkat. The experience that you've sort of shared with each one of us is amazing. Pankaj left his presentation where he actually said there are certain permutation and combinations, and we need to really look into those permutation and combinations and then look at value. Venkat, I think, just amazed us with the permutation and combinations. He had technology at one point, and at the other point, he had very simple steps of consumer delight. Let me really tell you, each one of these things are actually adding up to the value that the customer actually needs. And does research have an answer? So my objective here is obviously talk about whether research has an option over here to build on these variables. Well, before I get into that, I'll really want to first start with the fact of what my heading really is. It's irrational decision making. And I think that's the reason why this whole paradigm of pricing is a bit more complicated than what we think. There are simple steps. Those steps are built over a long period of time, but possibly an error that we could make at a certain span of time could actually have a big impact during the brand lives process cycle, really. I'm become a great fan of behavioral economics, and I've become a great fan of, Kahneman and Tversky, who sort of brought in these experiences and learnings to each one of us. So, I would sort of pick up an example from one of the behavioral scientists. It's a lot around decision making, but our focus since today is more around pricing. I would really talk about Dan Ariely. I think a lot of you over here may have read his book, which is Predictably Irrational. It's doing the rounds pretty well. What I've really done is I've picked up certain small examples which actually illustrate where and how we could go wrong with pricing, or where and how we can go really right with pricing over here. One of the examples that you can see in over here, so I'm picking up certain experiments, certain very simple experiments so that you all can understand pricing. What Dan and his team did was he asked a set of respondents, and from those set of respondents, he said, if you have to buy a product, and in this case, I think he had picked up a cordless keyboard, so he asked his set of respondents, please pick up the pricing of the cordless keyboard, and that pricing should be similar to your social security number. He's prompted the people where he actually said, let it be similar to the social security number. Not at all surprising. What actually did happen, all those people who had their social security number in the top 20% of the percentile, more closer towards the hundreds, were actually willing to pay 3 times more the price than those set of people where the social security number was in the bottom 20 percentage of the security numbers here. This is what he really defined as anchoring effect. Now you can just imagine, people are paying 3 times more just because of one bias that's really been put up over here. And what is this bias? This bias typically is the numerical bias that he let in. And at a subconscious level, it prompted people to give a particular price over here. So that's really where I said, one could make a small mistake and that could have a huge bearing on the overall, reaction to the overall product and price value equation. I'll pick up another example. This is again, another example which is really coming from Dan's team. Dan's done some very simple examples around pricing research over here. What he again did was he got 2 set of panels. In one set of panels, let's sort of call that as my, experimental panel. What he actually did, he asked all his set of people to pick up certain set of chocolates. The price of each of those chocolate pieces was 14 cents. Then he actually brought down the price to free and he said, just pick those up. So that was really one panel. And there was the second panel where he actually exposed and he said, guys, pick up your set of chocolates at 15 cents. Then he reduced the pricing to 1 cent. Voila. The difference between the two was still 14 cents. But I will not really tell you whether the relationship was really a linear relationship or not. That's really where came in this whole concept of free service, where people started to delight customers through this whole concept of free service. And he has really given amazing examples of what really free is all about. It has much higher value than possibly each one of us can connect. And the example is really right in front of you. I'll pick up one last example over here. And this one last example is, sorry, Pankaj, it's just the last one, the third experiment which he has. The previous slide itself, Pankaj. Yeah, so this is experiment number 3. Finally, this is what sort of talks about the fact that price is often taken as an indicator of quality. He did an amazing experiment over here. He again picked up 2 set of profile of cohorts, a certain segment as the experimental and the certain segment as the control. He invited all these respondents and he said, this basically is a problem solving exercise that we would be undertaking. You all would be given certain problems and you need to solve those puzzles. He went out to one of the groups and he said, this is an energy drink which can enhance your ability to solve problems. And this is the price of that energy drink. And he stated that as the maximum retail price. To the second set, he actually went and said the same thing. He said, this is an energy drink which would enhance your ability. But here's what, I bought this at a discounted price. The test happened. And actually, the set which was delivered the discounted product were able to solve much fewer problems than the set which was given the product at a market retail price. So you actually look at these 3 different examples over here, where it's just the exposure of pricing which is sort of have had a huge impact on how people react to pricing. And each one of us till so many years thought we were all Homo economicus. It's a well labeled acronym, and I think the behavioral economists have used it to such a large extent where they've said we are not Homo economicus. And Thaler and Sestin, which is one of the papers that they've presented, they've really challenged that our decision making is not as rational as we actually expect it to be. We are not as selfish, because why they say we are selfish? Because they think we pick up the best product that suits our needs. There've been enough papers, and the conclusion of those papers really are these three different sets that we talk about, which is cognitive biases. We have had our own learning. We have had our own learning curves, and basis each one of those learning curves that we've had, we decide whether something is working for us or not working for us. And this, as an environment, is not something that's possibly known to a lot of customers. Venkat did really talk about this, how at Titan and at Tanishq, they seem to know their customer right till the T. And I think that seems to have worked very well. Emotion is another thing. And that's why, whenever you look at brands, the same set of activities done by a particular brand is not taken so well when the same set of activities done by another brand. And that's really where the emotional bond comes in. And we all know how, social influences, peer pressure, word of mouth, across a lot of industries have really a big advantage. So these are certain aspects that really have to be kept in mind in terms of evaluating value, evaluating pricing. So does consumer research, Pankaj, next slide, thanks. Does consumer research really have a solution to this? And yes, what we've been talking about till now is the concept of trade-offs. Each one of us, when picks up a particular product, we actually see some more value in it, or we actually see less value in the other product. It's not an isolated decision that we take. It's always a relative decision that we take. So I remember many years back, we were doing research, and we were doing research for aerated drinks. The deal over there was, how can we get into the forte of tea drinking space or coffee drinking space in South India? So that's how the whole research really started. It was beverage as a category, and then how could aerated drinks impact beverages really? So it's the trade-off between one category to the other. And conjoint analysis that I have in over here is a fantastic tool that allows us to understand trade-offs. It really decomposes the overall judgment of the customer over here. The value that he puts to the different deliverables, the set of value that he puts to the breakdown within those variables. So it will actually tell you what value does it give to brand, and within brand, it actually gives us an output which typically tells which brand gets more value vis-a-vis the other brand. So this as a tool can be used by all over here in terms of understanding product configurations, can be used by each one of us in terms of understanding the kind of services that we need to do, and hence what's the pricing that needs to be done in. The next slide, which is over here, and that's really my last slide over here, before we take up the questions, it's a very simple thing. On the left-hand side is what we show is a chart where to the respondents, we actually tell them these are the different services. So column A would be a set of services. This I've just sort of picked up for certain automotive industry, where you want to pick up a car which has predictive forward collision. Does it have a feature which is intelligent parking assist, a hill descent control? So that's one product package. The next column is another product package. The third's another product. And we actually ask this in a very simple way with these combinations which are scientifically made as to what gets picked up and what doesn't really get picked up over here. What we're really saying in over here is what you see on the right-hand side. There are these utilities, let's forget the maths, but just let's look at the descending order. Everything on the top rows are things which the customer has given more value through this derived methodology. If you move on to the second column, which is the maximum retail price, that's what the marketer wanted to give as a value. This is at the price at which he wanted to sell. And then there was the consumer's perceived price, which we picked up from the research. The last column is a difference between the consumer's perceived price, which means what is it that the consumer wants to pay vis-a-vis the MRP. This defines the premium. Interestingly, if you look at the top row's last column, you see a little many positives. That's a delight. The customer is actually willing to pay more than what the marketer is wanting to ask. That's what really conjoint does through a derived method. The moment you keep on going down, and let's just look at the last 7, 8 odd columns where you have the red line, you just see the negatives. Less utility is what the customer is putting to those values, and that is the area where the market retail price consistently beats the consumer's perceived price. That's the strong connect between the trade-offs, the kind of rankings and the ratings that you may get for trade-offs. And when I mean trade-offs, it's just not product, it's also services. So you could actually define what's the combination of services that you want to give to your elite customers, what's the combination of service that you want to give to your value derivers, because each product may have its own set of portfolios, may have its own set of variants. And you could really segment your consumers and really say this set gets this product, the other set gets the other product. And why we really did this exercise was to understand what variants of cars should have what features. So one could look at the premium variables from here and said, these are the ones that go into my premium model. The ones that you see which are the must-have kind of a thing, we say that these are the ones obviously which can go into the value seekers, while one could continue to ignore certain variables which are much lower down the utility. So what we're saying is, as researchers, there is something available on the table. And all you marketing professionals can actually pick some of these specific methodologies and really try to develop something as big as Titan. That's a dream for all of us. That's a dream Venkat has managed to sort of set up. And that's really where I would conclude my presentation in terms of saying, understand trade-offs and you may be able to get a great business in place. Thanks a lot.
Over to Group Captain for the questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Balraman, would you like to have any comments before I take on the number of questions that come from YouTube and Facebook? Once you permit me, after your comments, I'll do that.
Yeah. Actually, this perceived value versus price is a multivariant variable. For example, today the festival season has started, and I see that newspapers have 3-4 full-page ads before you get to the news. So I'm sure that Tanishq shops are also starting to see a lot of footfalls. So the perceived attraction or product, like anything that is a personal enjoyment, a personal gift, like a textile or a jewelry, varies during the year, right? I mean, there are times when people want to be very, very strict on their spending, and there are times when they want to let go, right? So is that not a factor as well?
And it is more a season which is determined by the events in the season.
Yes. So perceived value changes, right?
Perceived value, no. Perceived value does not change. It's more the kind of, like there is more gold bought in a certain time, more diamond bought in another time. But that's more to do with the need for such a product. It is not as if in July the perceived value is lower than in November or anything like that.
And now let me rephrase what I'm saying. You see, I knew the price was 3 lakhs rupees in July, and it is 3 lakhs rupees during Diwali time. But at that time, the money was more important to me than the jewelry. When it is a festival season, the jewelry is more important to me than the money. So the value trade-off distinctly changes.
No, that is, you're talking about the decision to spend.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No,
I mean,
different from perceived value.
Yeah, suddenly I feel like having jewelry. Here I did not.
So the equation doesn't change, but the urgency changes, is what Venkat is saying. Yeah.
Think about
more perceived to be more expensive in July when I'm not wanting to buy, but less expensive and
I want to use the money. Yeah, you look at, if I'm a business, but Hindustan Times gave me the same ad space for the same money, and suddenly I want, want to use it. I mean, there is a demand, and I know that everyone else will book, so I'm willing to pay. I accept that there is competition for it. So competition also changes the perceived value.
Yeah, of course.
Can we go ahead with the questions from the...
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. We have over 1,100 viewers watching this program from our social media portals, quite a number of them. And the other question which has come from Delhi from Mr. Kaushal, he says, when you think about the companies that are customer-centric or even customer-obsessed, which one comes to our mind? Are Amazon, Zap, the Ritz, Carlton, Four Seasons, Southwest Airlines, etc. How did they get right there? What did they do differently to ensure they always delivered great experience for the customers?
So if I may take stab at it, because some of these Amazon and Southwest Airlines and even our own Hindustan Liver Ponds and, Titan, there are Indian brands as well. So as, I think what Venkat had alluded to, that as a company has to make up its mind what they are going to be doing and they're good at and build people and strategies around that. So Southwest, for example, has always focused on simplicity, one aircraft, low price, and time. So the Indigo model, right? And so the Southwest is the Indigo of the US, for example. Amazon has always focused on obsessive customer experience, technology, and cost, right? So in Ponds and Levers, again, value and cost. It was more around the value for money balance, whereas a Titan clearly is focused a lot on value. Ponds and Levers used to balance more on price and value. So in summary, figuring out what your strategy is and then keeping it simple in the execution. But Venkat and Mr. Balraman with the wide experience could add on to that.
Yes, Mr. Venkat?
No, I think he has covered it quite well.
Thank you. There's another question which has come from Mr. Bala from Facebook. Yes, Mr. Bala. Yes.
A number of people have been saying they are not able to get into the Zoom. So the questions might be lower because of that. They are saying that YouTube works, Zoom is not working.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll check on that, sir. Maybe they're not able to get into the thing. We'll check that, the technical thing. We'll check that, sir. Here's a question from Facebook is how to deal with the competitive landscape when consumer spending habits are fundamentally altered?
Maybe the COVID.
Yes, different situations. One situation is COVID. There could be a number of situations which alters fundamentally the consumer spending habits actually due to inflation, due to so many other factors. How do you face such a situation you have?
So the consumer habits do not change immediately and fast. Now, much as marketers would like it. So knowing, for example, again, taking Titan's example, the fact that local Titan, the Tanishq example, which is built on modernity plus.
Hello.
Please go ahead.
We can't hear you. Yeah. Did you mute yourself, Pankaj?
No, sir. I think too many people are building, watching web series, I think. So some habits, technology changes, the consumer habits on many categories do not change. For example, I give jewelry's example. So understanding the consumer is very important and understanding the changing world is very important. Once you understand these two, you can predict what will happen in your category. So hence what's happening in the world, it's very important to understand, and what's happening to your consumers in their life. Then you are a little ahead of the change which is likely to happen. In our case, for example, digital e-papers is something we are ahead of the curve, because even before COVID hit, we were already becoming big on digital e-papers as a company. But that would be my short take. But over to Rahul and Venkat.
If I were to look at the situation today, which is a very, very unusual and different situation, where people are most of the time working from home and not at all socializing. So in our case, virtually all our products are meant for, in a way, dressing up. And when you are not going out of your house, either to work to a party, to a function, to dine out, to a movie, then the dressing up requirements are actually substantially less. And therefore, why would somebody buy a new pair of shoes, new trousers, new watch, new goggles, new pendants? It's a big challenge. And how do you, in such a situation like that, actually create demand? By creating some kind of a desire. So this is the challenge that all of us are, and I'm sure in every company working with. And now more and more companies are, focusing on this above the keyboard dressing, because all of us are sitting at home. Like even now, some of us may be wearing shorts and wearing shirts just to appear on the camera, and therefore the premium tops, for example, premium casual wear is one of the categories which is galloping in companies like apparel industry, whereas trousers and formal shirts and all that just not moving, because who needs a formal shirt when you're not going to work in the office, right? And therefore, in a way, reimagining the workspace inside the house, and even our designers are working on above the keyboard dressing. So designing to above the keyboard dressing. The other thing is that people are worried about, coming to the store or spending too long a time in the store. So can we do appointment shopping, video demonstration, so that much of the work is done through video before you even come in, and you come in and spend only 10 minutes in the store just to look at the necklace that you have identified through the video and then go off, so that your worries about COVID and exposure and all are dramatically reduced. So by listening to the customer, whether it is inflation time or COVID time, to spending a lot of time listening to the customers, understanding the issues that they have, companies can certainly innovate much better and do better than otherwise. We are still nowhere near the normal, but some of us are better than others in being closer to the normal.
Thank you, sir. Super, sir. One last question before we close. A number of questions have come. I picked up. This looks quite interesting and relevant to the theme. How do you treat your own customers, consumers, and clients? Do you just enough to satisfy them, or do you consistently look to exceed their expectations? Now, also, he wants to know, how can we make our new product development more customer-centric by starting from target customer perspective?
Who is the question addressed to?
This is Rohit. Anybody, Mr. Pankaj, you would like to take, or Mr. Venkat?
I think
maybe to do with research, Rahul.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Let me start with the second point. I think what we do at Titan is certainly understanding the requirements of the customer first. Like what kind of products are we now needing to create? And then there is a fair amount of conversation that happens between the design department and the target customer sample, because we are a retailing company with millions of customers in our database. We can quickly reach out to some 50 people and call them over to a room, or today call them over to a chat room and converse and understand much more deeply what exactly is what we need to create. And thereafter, there is multiple steps of engaging with them, with concepts, with designs, with prototypes. And finally, we have a new product introduction meet, which of course now we are doing digitally and very well, but earlier we used to do physically, where we used to get representatives from all our stores to come down to Hosur and look at all the pieces, and they would place an order. And then we would choose only those pieces on which the order rate is more than 90% to make sure that whatever we produce actually sells. Okay. And thereby not getting stuck just because some of us feel that they're good, but we go by the voice of the staff who knows what sells and what doesn't sell. So through that process, we end up doing two things. One is a lot of innovation which builds the brand value and the differentiation which gets us the premium, the traffic and all that. The second is the business benefit of proper stock turns and not the production getting stuck in the stores and not selling. So that's the first point. Could you just repeat the second? The first part of the question. I wasn't too clear between customer, consumer, something like that you said, Captain?
How can we make our new product development more customer-centric?
No, that's what I spoke just now. But there was
yes, other question is, how do you treat your own customer, consumers, and clients? Do you just enough to satisfy them, or do you consistently look to exceed their expectations all the time?
I don't know if the distinction between customer and consumer is customers are the intermediaries, the partners in the distribution, maybe, and consumers are the people who buy your products. But I don't know who the clients are, because clients may be in B2B, for example. You call them clients in B2B. So our focus is substantially, obsessively, certainly with consumers, who in our business we call customers, because in ponds they'd be called consumers because our products are actually consumed, whereas in our case the products are not consumed. So we call them customers. But nevertheless, just like I spoke earlier, we spend a lot of time being in touch, and also leadership takes effort to be in the market. Like, I have traveled to the smallest towns in the country. I continue to do that except for the last 6 months. And everywhere I go, I meet with 20, 30, 40, 50 customers, listen to them, put myself in the hot seat. Because sometimes what happens, there are certain policies, processes, and strategies of the company which are not necessarily consumer oriented. And the voice of the consumer does not reach properly the head office through the system. And since we have the power in head office, we sometimes dismiss the views of the sales staff which comes up, saying that, no, this is okay, you manage and all that. But when I'm sitting in a small town in Haryana, for example, and where the customer is directly talking to me with a lot of aggression and anger, then I'm, in a way, jolted by the emotion of that, the power of that feeling. And it makes me review whatever is the strategy or policy or process, and it makes me change that when I directly hear that. So we encourage the leaders of the company to be directly in touch with our customers, and of course our partners, which are our distributors, dealers, franchises, and all that. So between these two, direct, not just looking at data, but talking directly to people and putting pressure on ourselves to change. That's a very, very important philosophical and tactical approach to becoming very, very customer centric.
I'll just add one line to what Venkat said. So, yes. Engaging with a customer, a consumer, client, listening to what they want is always a great source of ideas. But after that, 2 checks: A, can we deliver on that, and will it be profitable for us or not lost? For example, what Rahul showed us, some of the features which cost the company X rupees, but consumer valued it at 2X. So that's great because consumer loves it, company can sell it. But there was some which cost the company X, but the consumer was willing to pay X by 2. So every time you sell it, you will make loss. So that will not be okay. So you have to cost optimize. And Rahul's chart had some of those numbers. Some features were consumer saw value, but it didn't cost the company much. So in summary, absolutely like Venkat said, talking to customers, clients, and listening to the voice, then checking with the production people, whoever does service production, product production, whatever. So, and then it should not be loss making, or how do you re-engineer it? That's the way to progress things.
Here's a question come from Mr. Kashpekar. Last question addressed to Mr. Venkat. Mr. Balraman, can I take this question before we close it? Last question. Many companies have different practices in place for defining and delivering greater consumer experience, like voice of the customer programs, co-creation, journey mapping, etc. But the question is, do they make a difference? Is this impacting the loyalty of your customers? And does this make you stand out from your competitors? Do they really bring an outside approach to make your staff members and your team think differently and bring different perspective to the consumers?
Very much. I think the customer obsession of the company, any company, as expressed, as in a way dreamed and expressed by the leadership of the company, the most important starting point, after which the company has to take substantial efforts to get everyone immersed in this, believe in this. And I mean everyone, across all functions, in the front, in the back, and how much effort the leadership and the rest of the management takes in continuously drilling it into the psyche of every single employee. How much, for example, the minute one email comes from a dissatisfied customer, for example, how disturbed do we actually get? Does the managing director of the company actually get, and everybody around actually gets? Says something about how customer oriented that company is. And do you actually reach out yourself to the customer and tell the customer, look, I have seen your message, I'm worried about it, I'm now delegating it to so and so to solve it, and I will be in touch with that person till it is solved, is a huge reassurance. And that signal goes to everybody in the company, whoever is involved in that particular customer. Look, Venkat is watching or Bhaskar is watching, and therefore we have to be on our toes on this. And that is a very, very powerful, keeping everybody focused.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking. Before I request Mr. Balraman for his closing, concluding comments, as a token of our appreciation, I would like to present to you what's happening during the pandemic, which is a very, very ideal way to convey our token of our appreciation. On your behalf, we would like to present a mask to the various people who are in need. Can I have that slide, please, Mohan? Okay. And also, all the viewers watching this program, please do give your feedback. It's very, very important. This is what we do. We present about or 300 masks on your behalf. We go to different NGOs, different people. We keep giving them almost. We add up to thousands of masks. And thank you so much. And really appreciate your thought-provoking insights on a very, very important theme, which is number of feedbacks that come. And Mr. Balraman, for your concluding remark before we close.
Yeah, thank you. Referring to what Venkat said about how a customer complaint is handled, my own understanding of, after long years in marketing is that when a customer complains about something in your service or product, you have the great advantage of the customer's total attention. What you do then will be noticed, remembered, and talked about. So this is a fantastic opportunity to build great bonding with the customer, is what I had noticed. And so that's a great point, Venkat. I agree with that. And the customer's value perception is a lot more involved subject than what we have discussed today. Due to limitations of time, we had taken one aspect of value perception versus price. But customers value, the customers know our brand far more than we know our brand. To the customer, the brand is a lot closer than the brand is to us. What the brand to me as the MD of Ponds, to the customer, it's a lot more close. The customer would not want anything changed in Ponds. You would have heard stories about how customers were very uncomfortable about Coca-Cola changing anything in its product mix, brand, and all. So to the customer, the brand is a very, very close relative. The second aspect of value that we had not discussed is value depends very much upon the positioning of the brand and the product. I had seen that even drivers used to buy a very expensive talcum powder called Johnson & Johnson for their children. Johnson & Johnson was 10 rupees a can, whereas Ponds was 6 rupees a can. But still they would buy Johnson & Johnson because to them, their baby was very, very important. So depending upon the use to which a product is put, a brand is put, that is the positioning. For example, medicine. People will be willing to pay a very high price. But it was a fabulous topic today. And I want to personally thank each speaker, Pankaj, for the enormous detail with which he had researched each one of the product categories he dealt in. And to Venkat for the outstanding positioning that Tanishq and Titan are in. They are clear witness. They are global examples of the best marketed, best branded, delivered products and brands. Thank you, Venkat. Thank you for taking the time. And Rahul, you really had a very scientific approaches to helping marketers decide what makes sense to add as a feature, what doesn't make sense. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And this has been an outstanding event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balraman. That's come to the end of another Saturday Night Fever, Fragrance of Business, another important topic. If any of your friends have missed this, this is going to be available in all our social media sites, and which will share with them. It will be available Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and also on our MMA website for next 1 year. Thank you so much. And gentlemen, have a great evening. Enjoy the match. I know the two important teams are playing earlier, RCB, now Chennai Super King. May the best team win, and all the best, and stay safe, stay healthy till we meet again. Bye-bye and good night.
I want to say one last thing.
Yes, sir.
There is 71% of the people have rated this program as excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Bye-bye, sir. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Pankaj.